I literally can't wait to hear this cover of Heart of Stone. I think wanting to write it in pop literally just came from the fact that we love pop music. I loved writing like pop style of music, and also pop was a huge part of our friendship. Like from when we met early on in uni, we like to go out dancing together, go to each other's rooms, like have dance parties to like Jason Derulo, Rihanna. None of this guilty pleasure crap. We just like were obsessed with pop music in a very earnest way. It kind of came about because of circumstance, because we were writing it for like a university thing to take, like to an original musical to take to the Edinburgh Fringe. It kind of came about from like criteria of like the kind of show that we thought would like be good to write for the Fringe and would like sell at least, you know, one ticket. And that was kind of like having a famous subject matter, having something that played around with the form, because often like breaking into song during an naturalistic scene is something that alienates like your average audience member. Something that had like pop music, which is like, you know, an accessible genre that lots of people like. And then, you know, we also wanted to do something that had a majoritively or entirely female non-binary cast. You know, when we got the gig and it was like, okay, what's like a well-known group of women from history? And it's like the Six Wives of Henry VIII kind of like stands out. And there were some other ones of like, oh, maybe like something to do with like Shakespeare's female characters, or maybe like, I think at one point that was this like revolutionary feminist group from Iceland that my housemate told me about. And I was like, yeah, that could work. But then like the Six Wives, you know, it was like just like this glaringly obvious group of famous women. And then it was a bit like, okay, well, how do we tell like 4 decades of history in a 60-minute show? And then that's how like the pop concert thing kind of came. So it all kind of like came from criteria of like how to fill a 60-minute show.
What's interesting is like, it was while we were writing it because we wanted to like, we were going to Edinburgh, we had to sell tickets. We were also writing it because we were like, well, like, let's write the show that like we'd want to see. Not in a kind of like earnest way, but in a kind of like, oh God, like we've never written a musical. All of our friends are going to have to perform with it. All our friends who are like other cool like actors and comedians are going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe watching it as well. Like we don't want to do something completely cringe and naff. So we have to like think of something that we think could be a bit like fun and fresh and that we'd like respond to. Yeah, it's the combination of the pop music and the kind of like, I think it's like the comedy tone as well. I think the fact that it's like kind of like the way that we joke with each other. I think just after we'd written it is when the hashtag Me Too movement like really broke, and it was the kind of time when everyone was talking about like centering female stories and whose voices were missing from history and who we haven't been focusing on for years. So I think it's sort of also like the kind of like palatable feminism of it, I suppose, because it's not like cutting edge, like radical, like it's like the idea kind of, it's supposed to be like fun and joyful whilst also kind of like centering these like amazing performers who happen to be ladies and non-binary people. So yeah, I think it's something about the kind of like poppy funness of it, but also the fact that it sort of like speaks to a kind of global moment, I guess. The reason it's a ballad is kind of because of where it sits in terms of like the order of queens. So it's kind of thing where like we talked about how Catherine of Aragon, the first queen, she had enough material for like several really sad ballads. Like, what's the first one? It's got to be kind of fun. So we had to do the fun bit of her story. And we were like, oh, and then Anne Boleyn, let's like subvert what everyone thinks about her. And then I was like, okay, so now we kind of get to the sort of ballad territory. We need someone to have a kind of like Adele, Celine-esque kind of ballad. So like, what are we going to do? A big key idea to how we were thinking about all of their stories was like, what can we take from their story and like approach from a different perspective, or like using the same information that we were given, make it something fresh to have like to say about the queens. And I guess it was the kind of idea of like the Heart of Stone thing came from the idea of there being like a like strength in the fact that she like loved Henry or whatever, because we've had sort of like because of the like, as I say, palatable feminism, a lot of it is very like Beyonce, Who Run the World girls, like, shut up Henry, sit down. We were like, well, why don't we do a version where we like have someone who actually does love him, but that's not like a weakness or something to be ridiculed. That's something that's like a sign of strength. Then that's the one that we have rewritten the most. And like the version that you guys have performed and that exists in the world now, 5th or 6th draft, but then there are about 20 more after that, when we kept being like, we're not sure it's quite right. And then we like ended up being like, oh, we just needed to cut like 2 bars and that was all it needed to change.
Yeah, so many like ghost versions of the song that like haunt me constantly. And even like I'll be like watching the show live and there'll be like moments where I'll be like, oh wait, why is she doing the wrong lyrics? Like, where's the extra bit of melody? I was like, oh wait, no, that was from a draft that you were in. Why is that still in my head? Briefly called Unbreakable. We just got rid of the whole Heart of Stone thing. That song's been on a real journey.
Do a full concert of all the different versions of Heart of Stone.
I think the audience would be you and Christina.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'd be like, after the second one, like, yeah, oh God, I've actually got to get back to the babysitters. We didn't see each other for a really, really long time. What it felt like to us after, you know, when the lockdown came in. I think we first met up in like the summer, in like July or June or something.
But we saw each other on FaceTime like all day, every day. So it was a thing where we were like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in so long. But I know everything about you.
Yeah. We know a lot of writing partners who, like, you know, one of them were based in New York and one's in LA. And like every writing I've ever done has been like remote. And I was like, oh gosh, we've been really, really lucky that throughout our writing career, brief but albeit busy, like we've like managed to always like be in the same place to write. That's when I felt more grateful for that. Then it went from like seeing none of each other to spending every minute of every day together. So that was intense in a new way. I guess like recently it's been different than it has been before COVID, because we've had, you know, nothing else to do except write. And so we've come up with a more like regular structure where we like and treating it more like a day job, and we like meet up at a certain time, write for a certain number of hours, and then go back to our respective lives. Or some weeks it'll be like 3 days of us like sitting in the same room just with our laptops, looking at each other, trying to like crack the concept of a song, slamming our heads together and just not getting anywhere.
But then when you crack the concept, it's like bam, you can write the song in a second.
Yeah.
So
And then when you're doing the song, it's like, oh my God, we're like, oh yeah, that lyric, ha ha ha. And I just like, you know, some days you just spend the day literally like mainly in silence, sitting there being like, oh, what if you know, what if her heart is made of a brick? Oh no, it's not that. But then other days we'll just like spend the whole day laughing.
Oh, but the thing is if you try and just short circuit it and jump to the songwriting, that's disastrous. But then you're just there being like, what do we say? Oh, it's awful. But yeah, so it's like a funny thing where like the concepty stuff is the hard work. But you have to do it, otherwise you can't. The song's crap. When you have the first thing you ever write become this big global thing, it's sort of like, it kind of is like the career, I suppose, like chose us as opposed to the other way around, which is lots of fun in lots of ways, obviously. But our kind of strategy has been, as opposed to struggling with 1 second album, to do about 10 at the same time. But now we're just like, we're doing like lots of different big projects very slowly. We're writing a couple of stage musical things, writing songs for animated movies that already are in development and exist. Write a sort of villain song and then carry on with our lives, which is really fun. And then we've been doing quite a bit of pop writing as well.
It's very, very different. You know, you can be working on one song for a musical for like 3 weeks. But then when you meet up to do a pop session, often it's like, let's, you know, try and get something done by the end of the day. In some ways for us is like such an amazing break from the kind of like brain slamming together process that we have usually. And it's like a good exercise because usually we'll just spend like 3 years over like, should it be hat or hats? Do you know what I mean?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for choosing our song. I literally am so excited to hear it.